I want to say that my thoughts and prayers go out to the victims of this horrible tragedy that took place in Paris last week. This was an awful scene, one that we want never to be replicated in the United States, and one that causes us to fear and experience sadness anytime it occurs anywhere in the world. These are horrible events carried out by a horrible group of people who are bent on death and destruction in order to get their way. We can't allow terror to triumph in a world, and certainly we can't allow terror to triumph in the United States of America. I've been in meetings all week with my colleagues in the United States Senate on this issue. I just received a briefing from Homeland Security Secretary Jeh Johnson and a number of other officials from the intelligence community and from the defense community tonight in the Capitol. And they're monitoring the situation very carefully, and they're keeping us briefed on how we can protect the American homeland. There are a few issues that we've got to keep in mind as we respond to the tragedy in Paris. One of them relates to refugees. As we take refugees into this country, we have to remember the United States is a kind, charitable, hospitable place. We've always been a place that has welcomed people into our borders, particularly those who are dealing with intense tragedies elsewhere, who are facing intense persecution or natural disasters or other things like that that have made their current living conditions impossible. But the American people are understandably concerned about the possibility of more refugees coming into the United States from Syria. And it's not because of a lack of empathy for the Syrian people and what they're experiencing there. It's because of a real understandable concern that we might see people who are affiliated with ISIS or another terror group in Syria deliberately trying to become and ultimately becoming refugees in the United States, bent on carrying out terrorist attacks on the homeland. It's why I'm working with several of my colleagues in the United States Senate to put in place protections for the American people. I think we ought to be looking at taking a pause, at least suspending the receipt of refugees from Syria until we can get a handle on exactly what's happening over there, and until our government can assure the American people that they have ways of making sure that we're not taking in anyone into our borders, especially from that part of the world, who might be bent on this campaign of death and destruction. It's also important for us to take a good hard look at some of our visa programs. Our visa waiver program allows people to come in to the United States from Europe without a visa. And in light of the fact that a number of the attackers were in fact European citizens, this ought to cause us some concern. It appears to me that since a number, perhaps even a majority of the attackers in Paris were European citizens and therefore could have been eligible to come into the United States under the visa waiver program, that we ought to take a look at this and figure out whether there aren't ways to exclude people who might present us with some harm. I also think we have to look at our military strategy relative to ISIS. And as always, we rely on the President of the United States as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces to take whatever steps he deems necessary in order to protect the American people. We'll monitor this situation carefully, just as we have in the past. And again, my thoughts and prayers go out to the people who were harmed by this tragedy.